All right, well, good morning or good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Facebook, or wherever you're watching around the world online. Today we're going to talk about one of the most famous one-on-one fights in the Bible. I think everybody will have probably heard this story. Anybody want to guess the most famous one-on-one fight that takes place in the Bible?
David and Goliath.
Close, very close. But like some songs when we used to sing in the 80s, you know, we didn't have all the lyrics on YouTube and everything. We just had a radio, so oftentimes people would sing the wrong lyrics. And maybe that's what's happened over the years, because we're going to talk about the fight between David and Eliab. Okay? Sounds like Goliath, but it's not. It's David and Eliab. And that's the fight we're going to talk about today. Okay, Eliab is David's older brother.
Yeah.
And so you've probably heard this story 1,000 times, but we never focus on the front half of the story. Let me read this to you. In 1 Samuel 17:28, I'm going to read it from the Message, because that's always more entertaining. Eliab, his older brother, heard David fraternizing with the men and lost his temper. "What are you doing here? Why aren't you minding your own business, tending that scrawny flock of sheep? I know what you're up to. You've come down here to see the sights, hoping for a ringside seat at the bloody battle." Okay, so he's on his way to the story we've all heard as David and Goliath. And his first attack is from his older brother, who he's bringing some food. You know, he brings the food to him, then he gets attacked by his older brother. And so that's the first fight he runs into. And you know you're on track when you meet your attack. That's Johnny Cochran coming out today. Okay? You know you're on track when you meet your attack. And I found this out last night because I knew I was studying on this subject of, are you fighting the right enemy? And last night, my enemies might have been time, sleep, you know, needing to make sure I was prepared for today, wanting to get rest. And then my son said something to me that I took as an attack, and now I've turned my son into the enemy. And I go off on this long tirade and get into this giant argument before I'm going to bed, trying to rest up for today, and get totally sidetracked by the enemy by attacking my son, who is not the enemy. How many times do we attack someone that we think is the enemy, but it's not our assignment, and it's not the enemy? And that's how the devil works, right? He's not straight on. He knows he can't beat us in a straight on fight. So he has to be deceptive. He has to be cunning.
Yeah.
And the way he does that is present other people to distract us as our enemy. And we get distracted in the fight.
Yeah.
Okay, so last night, today I don't even know what that fight was about. But I can tell you it lasted about 30 minutes and drove me crazy. And disproportionately crazy, so that I know it was an attack of the enemy. And it kind of served as an example for this right here, for today. I'm like, holy moly, man, I decided to teach about this, and I walked head on into it.
Yeah.
You know? So last week I got hacked in my email account. My Gmail account got hacked, my credit card got stolen. They tried to buy an iPad on the Apple iStore. I thought it was okay because I looked at the shipping address and it was my house. I'm like, these crooks are rookies. They stole an iPad and shipped it to my house. Well, I did pay for it with my credit card, but at least it's coming to my house. But anyways, I got that stopped, and for like 3 hours, I was getting 5 emails a minute into my inbox from places that these people had registered for me online. And I couldn't do anything to stop it. I changed my password, and that doesn't matter. If they want to put your email address in the box, they can do that. And it was some kind of a bot that was signing me up for stuff from China, Korea, Russia, and I'm just bing, 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 emails going crazy. Well, I went and looked at the Apple Store and found out that I had the address, really, that it was shipping to, which was in Orlando. So I'm like, So now I'm getting on Google. I'm going to Google Maps. I'm looking up the house. I'm plotting how I can go to Orlando and catch the bad guys that have stolen my credit card. But in this rare occasion, because this is rare for me, I stopped and I went back to work doing what I was supposed to be doing. Because I knew that was a giant rabbit trail and a waste of time. Okay? But sometimes we get led down rabbit trails and chasing enemies we shouldn't be chasing.
Yeah.
And that's how the enemy works. He distracts us from our assignment.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what David does. He says, "What is it with you?" replied David. "All I did was ask a question." Ignoring his brother, he turned to someone else.
Yeah.
asked the same question and got the same answer as before. Here's David in his infinite wisdom. He just lets his brother know, I'm not taking your stuff. Mm-hmm. But then he turns his back on him and ignores him.
Yeah.
Okay? How much better would it have been for me to say my one sentence of peace to my son last night and turn my back and be done with it? Mm-hmm. But no, I had to hammer the point and defend my position and hammer the point and defend my position over and over again. But we can learn from David right here, when he knew that his brother wasn't the enemy. Mm-hmm. He wasn't the assignment. Mm-hmm. So he just dismissed him and turned his back on him and positioned himself to take on the real enemy when he changed.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got to learn how to change our position, change our direction, and walk away from that distracted fight and be aware. But sometimes I think we're aware that it's not the assignment, it's not our fight, and we're just too stubborn.
Yeah. And
we're going to stay there and defend ourselves anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, I look at Facebook. I call them Tweedle Beetle battles from Dr. Seuss. Somebody says something stupid on Facebook. Well, they do that about every 30 seconds. And I feel it's my responsibility to correct it. You know, so I'm writing pages of information like somebody cares, and just going down these rabbit trails. And that's a bad idea. And David gives us a great example of how just to walk away from that and get on with your assignment so you can be effective in what God's called you to do.
Amen.
Okay? We look at Facebook and we begin to judge others for what we see them doing. Mm-hmm. You know, you see somebody going on vacation and you know they're in debt and you start to judge them. Mm-hmm. You see somebody doing something else and you're like, why are they doing that? Mm-hmm. You know, and then what that does is it's like, instead of like throwing stones from glass houses, it's like throwing boomerangs. You throw the boomerang at them, it just comes back and you start judging yourself the same way. Mm-hmm. So you start criticizing other people. You have a critical eye for everything you see walking around. Mm-hmm. And then you're critical of yourself. And you wonder why your self-talk is so bad. Yeah. It's because you assume that the way you're looking at everybody else is the way that everybody else is looking at you. Yes. When nobody else is even thinking about you. Yeah. So it's important to learn to walk away like David did. Let's see what happens next. Then Saul answered David, "You can't go fight this Philistine. You're too young and inexperienced. You're only a boy. And he's been fighting at this fighting business since before you were born." Yeah. He's only a boy. Okay. But David didn't hear any of that. Mm-hmm. But how many of us listen to our only story? Yeah. Right? I don't mean only story like it's the only one, but you're only what? Okay. You're only a kid. You're only a homeschool mom. Mm-hmm. You're only a preacher. You're only a small business owner. Mm-hmm. You're only a widow. You're only a grandparent. Yeah. What is your only? I wish there was only one of them. I wish it was only about quantity. Mm-hmm. That would be nice. Mm-hmm. But how many only stories are people telling us and we're buying and accepting? Yeah. Or we're telling ourselves. It's not even that bad. Okay, so here Saul gives David his only story. You can't do this. You're only a boy. Well, not only does he not accept it, he gives an answer for it, but he doesn't add to it. We not only accept the only story, but we add to it. You know, I'm only a small business owner, and the last time I tried this, I failed, and I had to file bankruptcy, so I'm not going to try again. We add to the only story. And it's not that we're not supposed to try again. We're supposed to be better for the process and absolutely do it again, and do it again better. Okay, God's called us to be fruitful and multiply, and be better every day. Mm-hmm. Every day should be better than the next. Every week better than the next. Every month better than the next. I just saw a survey the other night, and political stuff's going on with the election year, and they ran a survey to ask Americans, how many of you feel like you're better off now than you were 3 years ago in polling for the president? And 61% of the people said that they feel they're better off now than they were 3 years ago. Well, however better off they are, it's not because of the government. Right. And it should have been 100%. Okay? 100% of us should be better off now than we were last year. Yeah. We should be ever progressing, ever learning, ever getting better. Yeah. Okay, so just because David didn't accept his only story, as many of us did, here was his answer. David said, I've been a shepherd, tending sheep for my father. Whenever a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I'd go after it. I'd knock it down and rescue the lamb. If it turned on me, I'd grab it by the throat and wring its neck. I'd kill it. Lion or bear, it made no difference. I killed it. And I'll do the same to this Philistine pig who's taunting the troops of God alive. God, who delivered me from the teeth of the lion and the claws of the bear, will deliver me from this Philistine.
Yes.
And Saul said, go, and God help you. And I wonder what his tone of voice was when he said, go, and God help you. Was it like, go, and Godspeed? Or was it like, go, and God help you? You know? Somebody go get the body bag. This is going to be ugly. I just wonder what his tone was. Because I'm reading it here like, yeah, go ahead, God help you. Good luck to you. Because I don't think Saul was a believer at that point.
Right.
But he didn't take it. He gave an answer and said, listen, you know, I know whose side I'm on. And I'm not really talking about the rest of the story where he fights Goliath. That's been talked about 100 times. But when he goes out and talks to Goliath, he tells Goliath that God has won the battle, not that he's won the battle.
Right.
He knows whose fight it is. He knows that it's basically already won.
Yeah.
And he knows from experience.
That's right.
His experience with the bear and the lion. And we should know from our experience and God's deliverance of our situations that we should have confidence to go into any battle, that we know that we're on God's side.
Yeah.
The problem is when we think that our agenda is necessarily God's agenda. So when we're battling for our agenda, we can get beat up. Okay? If David had been walking around and Goliath had cracked a yo mama joke to him, and he decided to go fight him, he might not have won. Because that wouldn't have been the battle. Okay? But this battle was for God's people.
Yeah.
And he was called to that battle. So it's important to know who your enemy is. And then you can go into battle with confidence. Have any of you all been in a battle on God's side and been killed?
No.
Anyone here been killed fighting for God?
No.
I'll give you a minute. Make sure. You sure? If you have, stand up. It's funny waiting for somebody to stand up. I have a flashback to my high school chapel days, and they'd have an altar call, and we got a couple hundred high schoolers in there, and they would sing 20 verses, 20 choruses of "Just As I Am," until somebody came up front to get saved. 15 verses, nobody come forward. They were going to sing "Just As I Am" until somebody came up and got saved. The Baptists are not playing. Okay? Time to get saved, somebody gets saved. I think once I went up and got saved just so we could go to lunch. I'm like, all right, I'll go. Take one for the team. That's so funny. I think I got saved 5 or 6 times that year. But lost my place. I went off the rabbit trail. Went off notes. But anyway, so obviously none of us have been killed fighting for God's battles, right? And even if we had, that's not even a loss in God's kingdom. Again, that's our agenda. I'll sometimes make fun of Ethan, who's playing a Fortnite video game or something, and he'll be like, oh man, I got killed. I'm like, who cares? It's a video game. You're going to respawn back at home anyways. We're going to respawn back at home base anyways too. So it's not that far off from video game to real life. Okay? The video game is what we view as reality. Real life is the spirit realm.
Amen.
So God's probably making fun of us for the way we view things sometimes, thinking your life is more like a video game than you think, because you don't pay attention to the things of the spirit. Okay? So we've been talking, kind of switching gears. How did David have this mindset, if you will? And there's all this talk right now about the coronavirus. Everybody's all worried about the coronavirus. And the latest stats are like 79,000 people infected, and I don't know, 2,500 people dead, something like that. A 3% mortality rate. So it's pretty serious. We talked about this. We've talked about in our family a little bit recently. Why the big uproar? Because millions of people get the flu, and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, die from the flu every year, but you don't see this big uproar. But the mortality, so I'm a number cruncher, so I went and crunched some numbers. The mortality rate from the flu is 0.001%. But the mortality rate from the coronavirus is now up to 3%. It was tracking at 2%. But again, I like to play with numbers just to see what the uproar is about. So it is quite a bit more, fatal if you get it. But you see people on airplanes wearing trash bags. Have anybody seen these pictures? They're actually flying on planes and they have complete trash bags over themselves to keep themselves from getting the virus. And because the virus is very contagious, right? So it's a pretty big deal, especially if you're in the confines of an airplane. I don't think you catch me flying to China on an airplane right now or back. That's not going to happen. But it's very contagious. And if you go to China, we watched somebody on China the other day on Periscope, and he was talking about how it's illegal right now to leave your house without a mask on. You have to wear a mask. Because not only are you worried about the virus that you could catch, but if you have the virus, you've got to be responsible not to spread that virus to somebody else. Okay? But there's another virus that runs around, and that virus is called negative thoughts. Okay? And those negative thoughts are more contagious than any coronavirus. They're more deadly than any coronavirus.
Yes, amen.
Okay? But what are we doing to protect ourselves from either getting infected with negative thoughts or infecting others with negative thoughts? What kind of mask or maybe a muzzle over our mouth should we be wearing? Okay? What kind of goggles or lenses should we be wearing to shield ourselves from what it is we're looking at? Scrolling our Facebooks and whatever else. We've got to be really careful about that.
That's right.
Okay? And there's a huge incubation period for the coronavirus in the world of viruses. It's like 14 days, which I guess is a big deal. But what's the incubation period for a thought? Think of something that happened to you in your childhood that still resurrects itself today as a thought. Or something you looked at on Facebook a week ago. It kind of triggered something in the back end. It didn't really manifest itself as a thought then. But this week you're going around and you're in a great mood, you're happy as could be, and this all of a sudden something hits you and you're aggravated. That ever happened to anybody? And you're not even sure why. Well, it's because of a contact that you had that you were infected with the negative thought because of where you were hanging out a couple of days ago. So we've got to watch what we're doing there, and I'm always big on the mindset and talking about your thoughts, and I brought this one back here there as well. Because David had to have the right mindset in the first place. Because fortunately for David, he didn't have Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. He's just hanging out in the fields with his sheep and God. So he had very little distraction in his relationship, in his walk with God, in his experience. And because of that, he wasn't distracted when his brother came at him as an enemy. He knew that wasn't the enemy, that wasn't the fight, so he walked right away from it. He didn't feel the need to defend himself. He was completely confident. I mean, in talking to Saul, he wasn't wishy-washy. He was like, no, I killed a bear, killed a lion, I've got this, no problem. Just a young boy, completely confident in what he was doing because of his experiences. And that's the way that we need to go after our assignments, is total confidence. We can't lose. We know whose side we're on. We've seen the experience and the results of our God, and we can't be beat. And when you go into it with that attitude, you can't be beat. So attitude is everything. So this week, as you go about your business and you're attacked by the enemy, first of all, don't give in to the enemy within and your own negative self-talk. Begin to spend some time in prayer and spending time with God, getting your mind right and focusing on these things each and every week, and get that turned around. So David just turned his back and walked away and changed his position, and you can do the same thing so that you can focus on the real enemy. What would happen if David had gotten into a big argument with his brother right then? He may have never found his way to David.
That's right.
Right? It'd be a whole different story. So make sure you get to your right assignment and you can't be harmed. Okay? You guys have a great week. Thank you.
Jesus.
Amen.